Hello, hello, Mr. Fusion here, still as Sailor Mercury. You know what that means. It's time for more Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon. Specifically, I'm still talking about the live-action series that's celebrating its 20th anniversary right now. I'm so excited to still be talking about this. Last month, I made a spoiler-light primer for the show. You can get to it by clicking the link above my head. Now that I've convinced all of you how amazing and awesome and better than any other version of Sailor Moon it is, it's time to dig a little deeper, get into some real analyzing. I trust you've all been spending the past month watching the show, so now I don't have to worry about spoilers. I have a lot to cover today, so let's just dive right into it. Remember, there are spoilers in this video. Big uns. Got it? Good. In a general sense, I liken the trajectory of PGSM to that of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when its 1990 live-action movie came out. Yeah, Batman Returns, Twin Peaks, Power Rangers, what franchise can't I compare this to? Anyway, Ninja Turtles. To kids like me who had only seen the cartoon, this movie was quite different in its tone, story, and characterizations. That's because it was primarily adapting the original comics, not the more well-known cartoon, although it did incorporate some aspects of the latter as well. Likewise, to fans who were only familiar with the 90s animated series, I imagine the arrival of PGSM seemed like a huge departure. And while this also distances itself from the manga, its identity is still more rooted in that telling. For example, I mentioned last time that the live-action show eschews the largely episodic format of the animated series in favor of a serialized narrative similar to that of the manga. Aesthetically, the animated series made the designs of the girls a bit more uniform, stripping away costume details unique to the individual girls. That's been reversed here. Sailor Moon has her winged hair accessories, Sailor Mercury doesn't have sleeves, I have sleeves, Sailor Venus wears her Love Me chain as a belt, Sailor Jupiter's rose belt was incorporated from design sketches and then retroactively added into the manga after this, and Sailor Mars has her belly button jewel. Ami sometimes wears glasses like her manga counterpart. The girls have a secret base of operations hidden in their hangout spot. Venus comes into possession of a sword. More importantly, Venus enters the story pretending to be the Moon Princess, serving as a decoy until Sailor Moon comes into her own. That's an idea the animated series drops entirely. Most elements that were created whole cloth for the animated series don't carry over here, even some of its more iconic ideas. Usagi and Rei aren't constantly bickering foils, Zoisite and Kunzite aren't romantically involved, there are no rainbow crystals, there is no Yuichiro, and you're definitely not going to see any heartbreaking storyline linking Naru and Nephrite. Those can be hard pills to swallow. However, that doesn't mean PGSM draws no inspiration from the animated series. Makoto's introduction, that of defending Usagi from bullies, is taken almost verbatim from that version, albeit aesthetically updated for 2003. In the manga, Makoto saves Usagi from a car. Mamoru is cast as college-aged, like in the animated version, unlike the high school boy he is in the manga. And I'm not even going to get into that, so let's just pivot to me saying that Mamoru and Motoki being good friends is also pulled from the animated series, as them not knowing each other becomes a pretty big plot point in the manga. I said in my last video that after an initial run of episodes of fairly straight adaptations, PGSM decided to tell the story in its own way. I didn't just mean that in terms of its soapy tone, I mean that it literally takes the narrative in brand new directions. Many things that happened in the manga or the 90s animated series don't happen here, and a lot of things that do happen here don't happen in either of those two tellings. While the story is ultimately that of the Dark Kingdom in the broadest of strokes, a lot of it is completely uncharted to any Moonie who hasn't set sail on these particular waters. See, I did a sailing metaphor because it's... Here's just a quick list of general things the show changes. The character of Umino, the swirly-eyed nerd in Usagi's class, he doesn't exist. Rei's grandpa, either the kindly mustachioed fellow of the manga or the bald pervert of the anime, doesn't exist. Crown Arcade, it's a karaoke parlor now. Usagi's mom, Ikuko, is no longer an archetypal demure housewife. Instead, she's living her best life as the eclectic cool mom who doesn't give a crap. She has her own quirky fashion sense, loves making weird omelets, and is just as scatterbrained as her daughter. I love her. As for Usagi's dad, he's basically become Ness's dad. That is to say, he remains unseen throughout the main series, forever working, only existing as a phone call. And the Dark Kingdom ain't at the North Pole. We certainly aren't going to the Arctic on this production budget, or in these costumes. Beyond that, there are several small aesthetic changes. Sailor Moon's transformation brooch is actually the one she uses in the third story arc. But it's actually only a brooch when she's transformed. Otherwise, it appears as a small pendant on a necklace, giving it a much less noticeable profile. The other girls have their transformation trinkets changed from pins to charm bracelets that turn into wrist-mounted morphers when they use them. Usagi's disguise pin is likewise updated for the times. It's now a magical flip phone that uses its camera function to copy other people's fashion choices. Ironically, this has ultimately dated it far more severely than the original pen. But all the girls have these phones, which means they often have a lot of fun using their own camera rolls to give each other makeovers, and I love fashion montages, so Magical Girl Flip Phone for the win. But one of my main points last time was that the live-action Sailor Moon is the only Sailor Moon telling that is character-driven instead of plot-driven. Its characters are far more dynamic, far more developed, far more fascinating. Initially, I was going to use this video to explore all the main characters, but then this script really got away from me, so let's just start with Sailor Moon today. Tsukino Usagi is the quintessential unlikely heroine. She loves to eat and sleep, she doesn't do well at school, she's hopelessly clumsy, she's a massive whiner and crybaby. It is absolutely wonderful for comedy. However, on occasion it does seem to push credulity that she's the leader of this team as opposed to literally anybody else. Kids, this is why hereditary monarchies don't work. This version of Usagi is realized in such a way that all of those ideas are still present, but toned down to a level that's a bit more believable on camera. She's still always running late for school, still has her head in the clouds rather than on her mission. She's still very much a ditz. I mean, this looks like the face my dog would make if I tried to teach her calculus. You'll definitely see her whine and mope. You're not going to see her break down into crying fits, though. This adaptation retains those traits, but centers what exactly it is that makes this person so special. And it's really simple. She's a good friend. This Usagi genuinely loves people and loves to make friends. She is the ultimate extrovert who insists on including everybody. She has no reservations, no guile, just this purity of spirit. Everybody she meets is simply a new friend she hasn't made yet. She leaps into any situation with both feet, and it's incredibly endearing. The comedy comes from everybody else not really knowing what to make of someone so open, so bubbly, so completely lacking in ulterior motives. As I said last time, the other Sailor Senshi in this version are all some variant of Weirdo Loner. They're all very competent, wonderful people, but they don't naturally go out of their way to reach out to others. So while Usagi is not the best leader, the smartest, the strongest, the most capable, the most disciplined, she is the only character who could bring this group of people together in the first place. And that's why I can easily buy this Usagi as the center of the group. The group would not exist without her serving as the heart of it. Even in the early awkward episodes, Usagi's ability to bring people together shines through. I first really noticed it in the episode where Rei is introduced. A bunch of girls are disappearing, people are blaming this weird shrine maiden, a group of girls attack Rei, and Usagi is forced to jump in and defend her. There are many ways a character could do this, and I feel most of them would be aggressive, confrontational. How dare you! But not Usagi. She diffuses the situation by being friendly. Usagi is effortlessly charming and persuasive, but she never uses that to manipulate people, it's just who she naturally is. She trusts people, even and especially when she really shouldn't. Naturally then, her character struggles manifest themselves when the story introduces situations where wearing one's heart on one's sleeve can become a huge liability. And that brings us to Princess Sailor Moon. Yeah, throughout the Sailor Moon franchise, there have been upgraded versions of Sailor Moon that add more frills and accessories and petticoats to the outfit. But we're not going past the first story arc, so we need to have something like that too. And so, Princess Sailor Moon is a transformation unique to this series, wherein Sailor Moon channels Princess Serenity. I love this design. I love the navy and pink color scheme. I love the addition of pearls. It's so extra. It's so gorgeous. I need one. And she kicks a lot of ass. However, that's not necessarily a good thing. If you know me at all, you know I'm not crazy about transformations or power-ups that are easy. I like the ones that come at a cost, and I especially like ones that have something to say about the story. And boy, does this one come with all of that baggage. This twist is one of the biggest changes to the series. See, while there was a war on the Moon Kingdom, that's not what destroyed it in this version. Princess Serenity did. When Endymion died in her arms, Serenity's grief activated the Silver Crystal, unleashing its power and destroying both the moon and the earth. That's why everyone, hero and villain alike, is afraid of Usagi and Mamoru falling in love again in this life. The destructive power and lack of control of Princess Sailor Moon represents that very real danger. It's rarely a good thing when she shows up. Princess Sailor Moon is when Princess Serenity takes over. Only now, Princess Serenity manifests as something of a vengeful spirit. She's motivated entirely by her love for Endymion, bitter over him having been taken from her. And she makes it perfectly clear that she will absolutely blow everything up if anything happens to him again. From what little experience I've had with the fandom, a lot of people seem to not like this, maybe? I think it's amazing. I would guess the blowback is because something sinister and downright unforgivably awful is added to our main protagonist, something that mars the tragic romanticism of this wonderful little moon kingdom. But I don't really see it that way. For one, Princess Serenity is not our protagonist. Tsukino Usagi is. She's a different person. She's not responsible for what Princess Serenity did in a previous life. But I can see the issue. Traditionally, Bishoujo Senshi Seira Moon treats reincarnation as fairly one-to-one. These are the same people, just encased in bubbles and plopped back down onto Earth. Their software gets rebooted whenever they die and they get to trade in their one-up mushrooms. Or at the very least, it's taken for granted they will love the same people. Honestly, I've never really cared for that. The manga version of this story in particular loses me the moment the girls go, "Oh yeah, that was us. I guess we're gonna be these people now. That's just destiny." We're going to dive way deeper into this when we get to Mars and Venus, but this series has some serious questions about that concept. It certainly doesn't sever the connection between incarnations, but it does treat them as more distinct. Even so, like I said, Princess Sailor Moon comes across as a vengeful spirit that needs to be cleansed, more a personification of the anger and loss Princess Serenity had to endure than the person herself. I mean, we get to see the real Princess Serenity in flashback, and she doesn't seem anything like the Princess Usagi encounters in the present. Even at the moment of destruction, the real Princess Serenity seems to be committing an act of pure, unrestrained emotion. A far cry from the cold, calculated, deliberate actions of Princess Sailor Moon. And let me just say for a second how amazing Sawai Miyu is here. She's already pitch perfect as Usagi, bringing that innocence and optimism as well as a smile that just melts your heart and immediately earns your trust. But she is able to make all three of these versions absolutely distinct from each other. It's not just the frilly costume that lets you know it's Princess Sailor Moon, it's a completely different performance. Princess Sailor Moon serves as a representation of Usagi's naked emotionality taken to its worst extreme. Usagi's emotions are her greatest strength, the show isn't disputing that, but it does present a challenge to them. Princess Serenity was right to grieve, she was right to feel, she was right to love. However, she didn't have control over those emotions nor control over the power of the silver crystal she possessed. That's why the world was destroyed, not because Princess Serenity is a terrible vindictive bitch, but because she didn't know how to deal with what she was feeling. Now, all that's left of her is the pain. Ultimately, the crystal is neutral. It reacts to whoever controls it. It can be used to destroy, or it can be used to heal. It can be the sword, or it can be the harp. It's up to Usagi to learn how to channel that more effectively, to master herself so as not to make the same mistakes, to learn the difference between love and possessiveness. That's a fantastic story, and it's a fantastic way to explore the reincarnation angle that's so key to Sailor Moon. This is me. This is my legacy. But it's also not me. I can be different. I don't think that ruins Princess Serenity, but frankly, even if it does, it's worth it for how it benefits Usagi, the character we actually care about. As long as we're on the subject of Usagi's kind-heartedness being weaponized against her, let's talk about Kuroki Mio. This is a character completely original to this series, only introduced about 3/5 of the way in. She's a famous pop idol who randomly transfers into Usagi's class. Unlike with nearly everybody else, Usagi is immediately suspicious of her. Not because she can sense something's amiss, but because she's Aino Minako's rival. Remember that Minako is also a pop idol in this series. Usagi doesn't even know yet that Minako is Sailor Venus. She just has a celebrity crush on Minako and maintains an obsessive level of brand loyalty in the face of all her classmates mooning over Mio. It's not revealed until later, but the fact of the matter is Mio is Queen Beryl's shadow, and she basically exists to make Usagi's school life miserable and as petty an act of villainy as possible. Why yes, I could just blow up your house and kill your family, but instead, and hear me out, I'm going to make it so all of your classmates hate you. It's definitely a weird addition. How did Queen Beryl make this person a celebrity? I don't know. I wasn't sure I'd be on board with this storyline, but you know what? I actually love Mio. In a series where nearly all the villains are sympathetic, Mio absolutely revels in being deliciously petty and manipulative. It certainly doesn't hurt that she's introduced with a kicking Usagi's ass at volleyball montage, accompanied by Queen's I Was Born to Love You. Of course, that only holds true if you saw it in its initial airing. Sorry, no licensed music for your DVD. But Mio is so good at presenting herself as the victim in every situation, maintaining just enough plausible deniability for every catty thing she does. It's actually kind of inspiring to watch. You know, if you're a terrible person. Like all good manipulators, she preys on that little grain of truth. It's obvious that Usagi doesn't like Mio from the get-go, so Mio is able to completely bypass the I just slammed a volleyball into your face and kicked you in the shins when nobody was looking, and go straight to, I just want to be your friend. Why do you hate me? And since Mio is technically correct about that, she is able to effortlessly guilt-trip Usagi into being her friend. Her next brilliant tactic is in how she then turns Usagi's classmates against her. A monster attacks, during which both Mio gets slightly injured and Usagi has to leave her to transform into Sailor Moon. The next day at school, did you do this to her, Usagi? Or did you at least leave her in her hour of need? We all know how much you hate her. What's brilliant about it, though, is that Mio makes things worse by defending Usagi. But she does it in such a way that it doesn't exonerate Usagi as much as it makes herself look more sympathetic. No, guys, don't be mad at her. I'm sure she didn't mean to leave me to die. I mean, I know she prefers Minako over me, and if Usagi really hates me that much, I'll stop being a singer because I just want my best friend Usagi to be happy. But what if those things don't work against someone like Minako, who immediately sees through her crap and just confronts her directly? Well, if that happens, Mio turns on the waterworks. There's no better way to derail any criticism and make the other person look like the bad guy than to start sobbing hysterically. She is so good at this! Believe me, I used to date someone just like this. It's incredibly effective. For the coup de grace, Mio tries to rehabilitate Usagi's broken reputation by using her connections to stage an Aino Minako concert. Oh, but let's tell everybody that you did it all by yourself. That way you'll get all the credit. Or blame if she doesn't show up because I never actually told her about it. But just when things are at their darkest, Minako shows up to save the day, performing her new song, Romance. I love this song. Baby, baby, romansu, kizuite. Why yes, I did watch the Super Dance Lesson video. Thank you for asking. But this is a pretty stock ending, right? Minako has just exposed Mio for the toxic manipulator that she is. The jig is up. Right? No! After another tearful breakdown from Mio, one in which she insists she only did this because she loves Usagi so much and wants her all to herself, Usagi comforts her and completely forgives her, flashing the warmest of Usagi smiles when Minako questions this terrible lapse in judgment. And the music frames this as a completely triumphant moment, even when we all know this is a mistake. It's absolutely amazing. It is the pinnacle of what makes Usagi so compelling as a character, her capacity for empathy. Even when she's wasting it on the absolute worst person, you can't help but love her for it. She wouldn't be Usagi otherwise. And Mio is a wonderful foil to that type of character, even if she doesn't fulfill that role for very long. I might as well talk about Chiba Mamoru now, as he more or less exists as an accessory for Usagi, the kin to her Barbie. And I certainly don't mind that the lead character's perspective is prioritized over their love interests. It only becomes a problem to me if the romantic relationship becomes prioritized, but the love interest never grows beyond an idea, because then it starts to make you wonder what the romance is actually based on. And yeah, Mamoru can very easily fall into that. He's Tuxedo Mask, he's dreamy and mysterious, and that's cool for Tuxedo Mask, for a crush, as someone to be desired. But who is he as a person that can sustain a relationship with Usagi, beyond just being an idealized dreamboat for her to win? And I'm not going to say the live-action interpretation of him solves that entirely, but it definitely tries to do more with him. The anime version of Mamoru falls into a relatively strict pattern for most of the story arc. There's a scene where he and Usagi bicker and insult each other. There's the later scene where Tuxedo Mask arrives at an opportune moment to help Sailor Moon. It's fairly late in the game that they discover their secret identities, but Mamoru is almost instantly brainwashed by the enemy after that, so it's not as if they really have opportunities to interact in a meaningful way. They're just in love because they're told they're supposed to be. Because she's the reincarnation of Princess Serenity and he's the reincarnation of Prince Endymion. The first few episodes of this series replicate the bump into each other and bicker dynamic, but it's dropped pretty quickly. Usagi and Mamoru are forced to team up at various points, which develops their own rapport as opposed to simply the one between Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask. Like his manga counterpart, this Mamoru discovers who Sailor Moon is quite early on, and quite a bit earlier than she figures out who he is. That creates a far more interesting and sometimes hilarious dynamic, as I pointed out before. It's amazing. Likewise, Usagi falls for Mamoru fairly early on, leading to the classic Lois Lane conundrum: do I love Clark Kent, or do I love Superman? Mamoru naturally remains completely oblivious to this. In fact, at one point when Sailor Moon confides in Tuxedo Mask that she's struggling with her crush on this guy she knows, Tuxedo Mask insists that she shouldn't give up on that guy. Phew, that should totally get her out of my hair. But since she falls for him so quickly, a major roadblock is added to keep them apart for another 15 episodes or so. As Mamoru is an orphan, he was raised by a kind benefactor, but this kind benefactor always expected Mamoru to marry his daughter Hina, another character unique to this telling. Hina suddenly comes back into the picture to collect on that wedding. She's the nicest, kindest, most selfless, and oblivious love interest to ever get in the way of the one true pairing, which just hurts Usagi all the more. Is it just me, or does everybody in this series have the most perfect bangs? Hina's not the evil love interest who has to be thwarted, she's just not the right one. But of course this makes Mamoru's double life all the more difficult, especially as his own feelings for Usagi begin to blossom. But he's dedicated to his responsibility and insists he will stay with Hina until she tells him otherwise. That's a phrase every romantic partner wants to hear. That and substituting I love you with you're really important to me, really, finally clues Hina into what her potential future has in store for her, and she steps aside graciously. But you really are important to me. Yeah, I got it, thanks. Please stop talking. The Hina stuff is fine. Functionally, it's very obviously something to keep the romance in a holding pattern for a while so other storylines can be developed. However, it unknowingly created the distracted boyfriend meme, and that's definitely worth something. It's worth a lot to me. Once their identities are out in the open through the power of Batman Returns, Mamoru often fights alongside Sailor Moon, now in his spiffy new Prince Endymion transformation. Yeah, the series actually drops Tuxedo Mask about halfway through in favor of this, and I can't complain. He looks fantastic. He even gets a sword. His main function in the latter parts of the story is to help Usagi control her emotions and the Silver Crystal. The two meaningfully interact more here than they do in other versions of this story arc, which ultimately makes their romance more believable. However, most of those interactions are related to plot. There's still very little that demonstrates what they have in common personally. Usually the story has enough momentum that I don't notice. However, the few opportunities we get to actually see them interact as a couple, when they're going shopping or frolicking on the beach, I suddenly find myself wondering, what is Mamoru looking for in a partner? What would you guys actually be talking about if there was no mission? Do you only know how to look cute together? It's the Sam and Diane conundrum. The danger of a really good, drawn-out will they, won't they, is that dynamic can be more interesting than when it resolves into a they will. But it works well enough for what it is, and I'd argue it's still better than other versions. It took me a whole video and I only got this far? Well, next time we will pick up with the other Sailor Guardians. All the rest of them? Maybe? We'll definitely be starting with this one next. I feel like I have an endless amount of things to say about this show. I could still go on for pages and pages about Usagi and Mamoru and Mio alone. Should I turn this into a full-on Sailor Moon dissection and cover this episode by episode? Well, consider these videos to be pilots for that. Let me know what you think. In the meantime, I'm loving these broader, series-focused videos, and I hope you are too. Please give this video all your engagement. If you can, please help out through Patreon. Special thanks again to Miss Dream and Sea of Serenity. Hint, hint. I also want to thank patron Josh Helms for instructing me on how to see the show. In the name of the moon, I will see you next time. I don't really know if I have a catchphrase. But that Tween Peaks joke was pretty good, wasn't it?